Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Hey everyone, welcome to another Xabio Arts tips and tricks video. If you're a returning subscriber, thanks for checking in, you spicy saliva machine. And if you're new, you're gonna regret discovering this channel. Let's go. By the way, I really did bust my camera stand in that last video, so bear with me. I'm recording this on Zoom with the potato I'm gonna eat for dinner later tonight. Okay, so I would see these Pinterest soccer moms making these watercolor plant things. I would see these anime dudes making drawings and coloring them all up with watercolor. And I would see Chinny's beautiful watercolor work that inspired me to create beautiful things. Sadly, she's not with us anymore, but her work continues to inspire thousands. Many blessings to her family. I keep telling you that Skillshare is great, but now I'm gonna prove it. Here are 15 watercolor tips that I learned from Skillshare. One Skillshare class. A single Skillshare class. Let's go. Watercolor tip number 1. Poop water. If you've ever painted anything, you know what I'm talking about. The water gets all thick and brown and nasty, and then you keep having to change it so that the poop water doesn't get on your paper. If this is a problem you're having, you can have 2 jars. One for cool colors and one for warm colors. Why? Because if your water looks like shit, your painting looks like shit. Watercolor tip number 2. Graphite pencil versus colored pencil. We all know that you can use your stupid regular pencil to do a rough sketch, but another cool thing you can do is use a colored pencil instead. If you use the colors that you'll be painting with, they'll blend in and be less noticeable. If you're painting green leaves, for example, you can sketch it lightly with a green colored pencil so no one will be able to see the sketch. And if you do sketch your drawing beforehand, do it lightly. Better yet, do it with a watercolor pencil. Those things are awesome. Watercolor tip number 3. Spray me, baby. Everyone who's got that cake knows it's better when it's wet. That's where a spray bottle comes in. You can spray your watercolor cakes to activate them before you even put your brushes in. The good thing about watercolor is, when it's dried, the pigment will still be there. You don't have to worry about the cakes getting all wet and then letting them all dry. You can activate them ahead of time before you even dip your brush in.
Wet, ready to go.
So if you got that cake, keep it wet. Words to live by. Watercolor tip number 4. Don't taste the cake. If you're going straight from the watercolor cake onto your paper, there's a lot you're missing out on. Watercolor is probably the easiest paint to mix together. So get a palette, or in my case, a scrap of plastic from a container of eraser heads, and mix some watercolor together in there to get better colors. It seems like a simple thing that doesn't need to be said, but lots of people don't mix colors together and wonder why they suck at color. You don't have to know color theory, just mix 2 together. Watercolor tip number 5. Color cheat sheet. Colors can be intimidating, especially when it comes to mixing them. So, create a color chart. So now you know how your colors mix together and what they'll look like when they're dry on the paper. I'm just skimming over this part, but in her Skillshare class, Dylan goes really in depth on how to create these color charts and how to mix your paints together. Watercolor tip number 6. Pick 3 and go brush your teeth. Limit your color palette. Find a few colors you really like and use those a lot. Sometimes you have too much to choose from and it gets overwhelming. That's fine. Stick with 3 or less colors for the whole page while you're still getting used to it. It frees up your brain to think about more important things like, oh, I don't know, making a painting that doesn't suck eggs? So look at your colors. Pick 3, go brush your teeth. Watercolor tip number 7. Paper towels are towels. You can reuse paper towels that got messy from a previous painting session. I don't know why I didn't think of that. It's pretty obvious, but when that Skillshare lady said it, I realized how wasteful I had been. Better yet, just use a dirty dish towel, then you'll never have to throw anything out. Does this really need to be its own tip? Probably not, but I included it because it is a scientific fact that I am a dumbass. Watercolor tip number 8. Cure for art block. Have a motif. Ooh. Wow, what a great word. I don't know what it means, but it sounds cool. Have a motif that you like to draw or paint every time you get started. This Skillshare lady, Dylan Mike Wazowski or whatever her name is, likes drawing leaves. They're very simple, they look good, and you don't have to think much when you're doing them. So have something you can fall back on when you're not inspired and out of ideas. Watercolor tip number 9. If you find yourself sliding towards the darkness, don't fight it. Go from light to dark. Watercolor is a transparent paint. That means with each layer of paint you put on, it gets darker. Even if you pick a super light color or a super watered down color, it will still show up darker. So start from light and then go to dark. I'm not even asking, that's just the only way that you can do it. Watercolor tip number 10, Battle of the Temperatures. Katy Perry might not know if math is related to science, but she does know a thing or two about hot and cold. Now if she were here, we know what she would say.
There are two types of watercolor paper, darling. Hot press and cold press, and don't you forget it, baby.
All you really need to know is that a hot press paper is, smooth, and cold press paper is, rough. The more rough the paper, the more water you need. Watercolor tip number 11, let it dry. Man, I'm sorry. Watercolor tip number 11, let that bitch dry. I know it's hard. I know you're impatient. I know you want to fix it because it looks bad. Don't. Fix it after you let it dry completely. Add another layer to fix it. If you keep trying to fix it before it dries, you'll end up with a soupy mess that looks like your poop water. Let it dry. Watercolor tip number 12. Here you go. I will not apologize for that. If your painting is super wet and taking a while to dry, use a hairdryer if you have one. You don't have to wait forever if you have a hairdryer. Watercolor tip number 13. Is it a brush pen or a pen brush? You can use the brush like a pen to add details after it's dry. This is kind of like using a brush pen, except you can choose any color you want. Make it black lines or add spots of bright color. Do this after it's dry though, please. Backwards coloring book, step number 14. Watercolor tip number 14, the backwards coloring book. Use a pen to make outlines and details. It's kind of like doing a coloring book, but backwards. So instead of like with a regular coloring book, you add color to the line drawings. This one, we're adding the line drawings to the color. And if you need help on where to put the color in the first place, that's where that light sketching can come in handy. So sketch out where your color goes, put the color on there, put the line drawing on top of it. You've made a beautiful backwards upside down sandwich. Be proud of it. Watercolor tip number 15. Probably not blood. You can use two brushes to create a splatter effect on the page. Load up one brush with a lot of paint and then smack it on the handle of the other brush so that it flicks onto the page. There's actually some fun nerdy physics stuff going on here, similar to a catapult or its obvious superior, the trebuchet, but we'll ignore all that for now. But basically when the brush handles collide, the bristles bend toward the paper very rapidly, and that causes the water to fling at the paper and splash down and spread out and splatters. Oh, what? Wait a minute. Wait. You feel it? You feel that? Bonus tip! Layer God. Don't be afraid to start with light colors first. It doesn't have to be super bright right away. The beautiful thing about watercolors is their ability to build on top of each other. Once water dries, the pigment is left behind. Let it dry, make another layer. It'll get darker and darker and darker as time goes on. So just make sure you follow tip number 11 and let it dry before you put more on. Does that make sense, please? I don't know if I'm legally allowed to do this or not, but I'm gonna give you 2 bonus tips. Extra bonus tip! Use a gel pen or something really white like gouache or a paint pen to add some details to it. Oof. Gets my giblets going, you know what I mean? If I give you a 3rd bonus tip, they'll come looking for me. I can't do it. All right, listen, I'll do it. But if I stop posting, tell my family I love them. Double extra bonus tip! Woo! If you put too much paint on the paper, just soak it up with a paper towel. Watercolor is actually very forgiving when it's wet. It's a lot easier to make mistakes with watercolor than some other mediums, so keep that in mind. All of these tips come from a class I watched on Skillshare called Getting to Know Your Paint by Dylan Murzwinski. There's way more tips in that Skillshare class than I mentioned in this video, so if you want all of them, you might want to start a free trial on Skillshare so you could see what she has to say. Link is in the description. She basically does science experiments with different paper types and brush sizes and stuff, and it's for beginners who have never touched watercolor. It goes through everything. Most of you already know, but for those of you who hear me say Skillshare and don't know what the heck I'm talking about, sorry for my language, I'll give you the basics. Skillshare is an online learning community with juicy video tutorials like the ones you see here on YouTube, but they're organized like proper classes. And it's not just art, they got music, photography, creative writing, business analytics, freelance, marketing, productivity, animation, how to summon the dead. They don't have that last one. It's a great resource. If you want to try it out for free, use the link in the description. Either that was my dad sneezing or throwing up. I'll check on him. He's fine. He threw up snot out of his nose. He sneezed. If you want to try Skillshare for free, use the link in the description and you can try it free for 2 months. And you can cancel anytime if you decide that it's not for you. Now, if you decide you do like it and you want to keep going after the free trial, it's like $8 something a month for their annual subscription. You get access to everything. I would recommend getting the free trial and watching as many classes as you can and seeing if Skillshare is the thing for you. You're bound to find a teacher that you like and then binge all their videos. Thanks again, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. I really like working with you guys. I think you have a great service that provides value to a lot of people, so thank you. Now, if you followed any of the tips in this video, you are legally required to eat your toenails. You know that, right? And you, go find a mirror and kiss yourself, you beautiful butt panda. You're lonely.